So this is my STEM bus reflection PowerPoint for W200. So for my introduction, I went on February 10th, so it was a little bit chilly outside, so we did our coding inside. I went from 1:15 to 4:15, which was about 3 hours. I taught kindergarten, or helped kindergarten, first grade, and fifth grade, and like I said, we worked on coding. So these are the different robots each grade did. So for first grade, they did the Kinder Lab Robotics, which is really cool. So it looks like this. It's called KIBO, and they got to build it, which was really fun. This was the Sphero Indy car that the first graders got to code. And it's just like a little race car, like as in like the Indy 500 almost. And this is the Sphero Bolt. It is just a circular robot that you can code. You can make it light up, you can make it talk, and it was super cool. So for kindergarten, like I said, we used this robot here, and they got to build it. These are all the different parts that it comes with, and they coded it using blocks. So they were blocks that could make it spin or sing or talk or whatever you wanted it to do, and then you would just scan it right here and push the play button, and then it would do the sequence that you coded with the blocks. So how I helped is I had to do a majority of the work in order to facilitate the learning and understanding, meaning like I would try to scan the codes because the kids couldn't really figure it out, and I had to help them build the robot because it was a little complicated and they weren't sure where things went, but I tried to make them be as hands-on as I could. And how technology was used, like I said, we used the blocks to code the cars to move, light up, and also use audio. There was one challenge where they had to code the robot to do the hokey pokey, which was really fun. What I would change is that I would do a different activity or make it take less time, only because this wasn't very hands-on for the kids, and so I would try to choose something a little bit more simpler. That way they could do it themselves, and I wouldn't have to facilitate so much. And after a while, the kids got bored because once they saw what it did, they didn't really want to do anything else, and there's only so much that that robot can do. And so we didn't need as much time as we had because then they just got bored. And so what I did well is I tried to help the kids stay on task as much as possible. They had a very short attention span, but we tried our best. And like I said, a struggle was that the kids lost interest fast, and we had a lot of spare time, so they weren't very engaged. What I could improve is I could try to be more conversational and think of new ideas to keep the kids engaged. That way they could try to keep messing with the robot and come up with new ideas, but they just eventually lost interest. So maybe I could try to facilitate that conversation more. And what I learned from my future teacher career is how to organize chaos. The chaos of the kindergartners was crazy, but we figured it out and we organized it together. The do's and don'ts of an activity and helpful ways for younger kids to code. So for first grade, like I said, we used this Indy car. So how I helped is I had to do the majority of the instruction in order to facilitate the learning and understanding. So I had to help them with instructions, but not necessarily doing the activity itself. They were pretty independent with that. So how the technology was used is you used a mat, and then you put these little pads that would tell the car what to do to go around a racetrack, and they would complete challenges. So down here are examples of the pads that could turn left, turn right, stop, slow down, go. And then there was a pad that you would put those little mats on to make a little racetrack for the Indy car, and it would follow the instructions. So some of the challenges were that the kids got frustrated if they couldn't complete the challenges because we didn't have as much time as we would have liked to try and figure out the sequence. So then they got very discouraged, which was a bummer because we couldn't complete the sequence. They did not like to work as a team. They liked to have their own ideas and just not communicate them with the other students and just do whatever they wanted. And we also were missing a couple materials in our kit, and so that was a disappointing find for us, and so we couldn't really do the challenges to the best of our ability. So what I would change is I would do less challenges and clear, not rushed instructions, because the less challenges there were, then we would have more time to complete the few that we had. And the instructions went by really fast because, again, we did not have as much time as the activity needed, and so they didn't really go over any instructions and just let the kids loose, which they were very confused with. But something I did well is that I helped the kids stay on task and think critically about their next move. So they were very confused, asking a lot of questions. I helped them to the best of my ability, answering those questions and stay on task. And where they would just throw out pads randomly, I tried to ask, why would you do this? Why would this work? How do you think this would work? And just try to facilitate their understanding instead of them just doing something randomly. Some struggles would be that the kids often would not listen to one another's ideas, or try to get them to pause and take a deep breath and just listen to one another, but then they would get really ramped up again and excited. So something I could improve is try to take more charge. Can be kind of a negative thing sometimes because you don't want to be completely in charge, but at the same time, you do need to have a balance. That way they're not taking advantage. So I just need to find that balance. And what I learned and how this contributes to my future teaching is that how first graders do not collaborate well, so maybe it would have been better if they did an individual coding activity, and how to try to get kids to think before they do. For example, instead of just throwing down the stop pad, ask them why they would do that. And last, for 5th grade, how I helped was I observed the students and answered questions as needed. The technology was the Sphero bolt, and they coded it to move across these mats, and so they had to actually code it to go across the food chain at first, and then they got like little challenges to tell it to go here, here, or here. So that was really fun. The kids were very independent. And last, for 5th grade, how I helped was I observed the students and answered questions as needed. The technology was the Sphero bolt, and they coded it to move across these mats, and so they had to actually code it to go across the food chain at first, and then they got like little challenges to tell it to go here, here, or here. So that was really fun. The kids were very independent. They just got into groups and then they started working. They were very calm and creative, and that fostered a very calm and creative environment. They worked well together, communicated well, and they all accomplished their tasks and even had time to mess around with the bolt to see what it could do, so that was really cool. What I would change, I don't know if I would really change anything much. The only thing I would maybe do is give some requirements and say like, oh, you have to code this robot to light up and say this thing at this point, maybe. But at that point, like, they already pretty much got the hang of it, so I would just let them go free. And some struggles were that the kids didn't need much help from me, which I don't really know if that's a struggle per se, because I think that's a good thing, but it was just a little tough because I couldn't help them very much. So I guess that was more of a personal struggle, but I was very proud of them for what they did independently. So something I can improve more on is I could probably try to challenge the students more. That way it wouldn't be so easy for them, and then they would maybe need a little more help or something. I'm not sure, but they seem to get the hang of it pretty fast. The 5th graders are pretty smart. And what I learned and how this contributes to my future teaching is I learned how kids should work in teams properly, because these 5th graders were very well in groups. How to manage an independent activity, how to like handle when kids don't have questions and they go off on their own. That was definitely a little bit of a learning curve. And what grade level is most independent and collaborative. So it's like the difference between 1st grade and kindergarten, where they're very independent versus, or not independent, very dependent and need a lot of instruction, whereas 5th grade is very independent and only asks a few questions here and there. And so for my overview, I had a really fun time, and then I figured out which grade levels I liked best, how to code, and all of that fun stuff. This is actually a picture of the STEM bus, but we didn't actually go on it. And yeah, I think that's everything.